Buenas and Hafide Todos Hamzu. This virtual public hearing by the Committee on Federal and Foreign Affairs, Telecommunications, Technology, and Labor is hereby called to order. Today is June 11th, Thursday, 2020, and the time is now 2 p.m. For the record, and in accordance with Section 8107 of Chapter 8.5 GCA, public hearing notices were sent out on Thursday, June 4th, 2020, adhering to the five working day notice, and a second public notice on Tuesday, June 9th, which was 48 hours prior to today. In addition, this virtual public hearing was noticed on the Guam Daily Post on was noticed on the Guam Legislature's website. Joining me here this afternoon are Legislative Secretary Senator Amanda Shelton, Senator Joe San Agustin, Senator Mary Torres, Senator Will Castro. And I want to thank all of my colleagues for joining me this afternoon. Before we proceed with the discussion of items on our virtual public hearing agenda, I'd like to provide some general rules of conduct for all who are in attendance. The conduct of this hearing shall be as follows. All members must abide by all rules of conduct and quality assurance standards, including but not limited to using a desktop or laptop computer with the webcam and microphone built in, broadcasting from a quiet room with little to no interruptions, broadcasting from a room with adequate lighting, specifically to ensure the participants' face is visible and not backlit, ensuring that a member's face is visible at all times, wearing proper attire, using only professional and respectful language and conduct, not utilizing virtual backgrounds, and not conducting any other activities during the duration of the meeting. When speaking, please ensure that you are unmuted and speaking clearly into your microphone. The chair will invite individuals who have signed up to testify, and individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking, state their name and title for record purposes. The order of questioning will begin with the panel of senators who shall complete their lines of questioning for each respective item on the agenda. Each member will be allowed to pose a question to an individual testifying for a round, and we can provide additional rounds if necessary. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violations of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the meeting room. We'll now continue with the first item on our agenda, Bill number 156-35 COR, an act to add a new subsection 10301.2, 10301.3, 10302B, C, D, and subsection 10304B to Article 3, Chapter 10, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to enacting the Digital Layers Public Domain Access and Benefit Act of 2019. This bill was introduced by Senator Will Castro and co-sponsored by Speaker Tina Rose Muñoz Barnes, Senator Luis Borja Muñoz, Senator Jim Moylan, and Senator Jose Pito Terlahi, who has also joined us. So I do want to acknowledge Senator Muñoz and Senator Pito Terlahi. Thank you both senators for joining us. And at this time, I'd like to invite Senator William M. Castro to deliver opening remarks as the prime sponsor of Bill 156-35.
Buenas and Hafide. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Senator Lee, for the opportunity to hear Bill 156. And I have to beg your indulgence, dispense at some because when I opened up, I had 2 flags, and I noticed our colleague, when he opened up, had to have 5 flags. And so I was giggling. I thought that was funny. So I mean, no disrespect to anybody there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chair, the bill in a nutshell is an attempt to make GIS layers available to the general public for fair use. I think we've shared in prior conversations, at least with some of my colleagues, that we've come across a lot of digital information that the local and or federal government has paid for. Digital layers would be one example of that. And from time to time, we also find from our constituencies that access to these layers is quite difficult. And in this particular case, GIS layers are either unable to be found, are not collated, or the protocols are not established. And so Bill 156 essentially makes this information available and as a part of public domain. There's some points in the intent. I'm just summarizing some of the intent as I foresaw it when initially drafting the bill. I think if the GIS layers are made available, there's a multitude of purposes it can serve. Obviously, it could be handy for first responders. It could be certainly made useful to realtors, others in the commercial sector. And in my prior conversation with Senator San Agustin and members of the prior administration, and for the record, with this administration, there's definitely a potential upside for generating revenue for the government of Guam. The bill, if you review it in its entirety, is actually quite simple and perhaps overly simple. And I will acknowledge publicly that there's a lot of opportunity given the recent testimony I just received from Mario, as an example, Mario Garcia, to improve the language. And so I thank you again, Senator Lee, for the opportunity. I want to thank my colleagues as well for having the confidence to at least introduce the bill as a starting point, particularly my co-sponsors, Speaker Tina Rose Muñoz Barnes, Senator Luis Borja Muñoz, Senator Jim Moylan, Senator Jose Piro Tulahi. And should the bill stand muster, Madam Chair, hopefully I can gain your confidence and you can help me improve it and we can add your name as well. Thank you. And to the general public who took time out of their very busy schedule to join us today and provide testimony, I thank you as well.
Thank you, Senator Castro. I'd also at this time like to acknowledge the presence of Vice Speaker Talina Cruz Nelson. Vice Speaker, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Colleagues, just so we're all aware, in the in-app chat feature, there's been a link posted to the Google Drive for this meeting. So if you have any questions about the bill, it can be found in the folder. At this time, I'd like to call the panel of individuals who signed up to testify. So that includes Mr. Joseph Borja, the Director of the Department of Land Management. And I also wanted to note that we received written testimony from Mr. Frank Lujan Jr., the Chief Technology Officer at the Office of Technology, as well as Mr. Mario Garcia. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Borja. Mr. Borja, please unmute and you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator. What I have really is really not testimony in favor or not in favor of the bill, because as you know, this bill will probably go to, will definitely go to a second and third reading where amendments and floor amendments that can be made. But I am, however, ready for a line-for-line review of the bill, hopefully to improve the bill. And let me just, there we go. And if the committee will allow, I will just go through the line by line. And the section 1, of course, the findings and intent, says that the legislature finds that a large amount of data generated using millions of dollars of public funds by various agencies and municipalities, the government of Guam. It would be good if we could identify that data, specifically with which database that large amount of data, because we get requests at land management for data, for documents and like that, and they are in various databases, and I'm sure the other agencies have also. By the way, let me just say that I believe there are 5 big boys that have GIS layers. And while it seems that I'm the only agency here that is testifying, I'm not sure. Hope I didn't get the memo, or I hope they didn't get the memo. But in any event, there are other big boys in this thing. And number one that you have is GWA. GWA has a very robust GIS system, and they are constantly improving it. But in today's insecure and dangerous world, I don't know that I would want everybody to know where my production wells are and where my lines are and things like that. Another big boy in this GIS world is Guam Power Authority. Guam Power Authority has a national award-winning GIS section, but I also probably would not want everybody to know where my grids are or how they were set up. So I'm just mentioning because I don't see them here. The other big boy in that GIS, of course, is Bureau of Statistics and Plans. Why? Because Bureau of Statistics and Plans is usually the lead agency that applies for grants to create these databases, to create this GIS. They're the ones that seek the funding because most of these things set up, as stated in the bill, gotten the funds are from federal agencies, U.S. Federal agencies, rather than Government of Guam general fund thing. So most of the time when you're improving systems, at least with land management, your hardware, your software, 9 times out of 10, that money to do that is coming from a grant from the federal government and not from GovCom. And land management only operates on the money it brings in. We are a special fund agency. We're not really a general fund agency. So, so it would be good if the drafter of the bill, the staff member could get that data. Which data are we talking about and how many are there? And secondly, on that line three, it would also be good to, what are we talking about? Millions of dollars, 1 million, 10 million, 9 million? Because I just put in, land management just put in a grant application for $450,000. So, $450,000 equipment in a $10 million operation is, it's relative. So that's the comment I have in that first sentence in there. And line five, all those such non-sensitive data. I think I would probably leave it up to those agencies to declare what is non-sensitive data. And like certainly data like where your water lines are and what sizes are, that's very important to developers and to realtors, things like engineers and the planners. So certainly I'm not saying that that's not important for them, and like that. So the other two big boys of this GIS thing is the federal government. Federal government is GIS layers. Some of them are secret. Some of them are top secret GIS layers. For example, the spread of the pipeline all over Guam. And relatively speaking, the land area occupied by a pipeline system with fuel in it is not the same as a pipeline system in the States, of course, comparable, unlike that. So the GIS layer for that pipeline system is important because some of those pipelines cross over Tomorrowland Trust property. So that GIS layer, federal GIS layer, is important at least to the Tomorrowland Trust. What do they have access to it? I don't know that. And then the other big player in this GIS group are the telecommunication companies. Where are your cables? Where are your towers? Things like that. Now that might be proprietary information because you see your competitor's weak point, they're weak over in Agat, let's put up a tower there, whatever. So some of that GIS might be proprietary information. Although the bill only addresses the government agencies, these are other GIS players that would want government GIS layers and like that. So there's that interrelationship on that. Number seven, line seven, legislature further finds that there is an increasing demand by the community for such data. There is an increasing demand for that data, but we don't, at land management, we don't see it coming from for the GIS. The access to data that the government the public wants is, I want to go into land management's records, recorded documents, and see who owns that property there, or see whether my brother sold my mother's land, things like that. I want to access the deeds. I want to access the mortgages. I want to access that information, not necessarily the GIS layers of the water lines and like that. There are people that come in to land management for that and to the other agencies, but those are usually developers, realtors, engineering firms, and the like. And the digital files that you provide to them for these GIS layers are a special file. And I'm not a technician, but I think they're called .shp, which requires special software to do and which requires special manipulation on that. So they're probably wanting that data to apply to a GLUC application as to where the closest water line is and what's the water line system like that. So there is an increasing demand, but not necessarily for the type of data that is stated in the bill. And I'll get back to that later, later, which is GIS, Geographic Information System, meaning basically almost graphics. You have another part of this information system, which is LIS, which is Land Information System. That's what's the zoning of that lot, how big is that lot, what's the assessed value of that lot, where is it located, what's around it, at least a year ago from the aerial photograph. So that's the kind of increasing demand that we get, at least from land management, that we see on it. So that's that paragraph. And then you have the third paragraph, which is legislature further finds that a territorial government data sharing accessibility policy is needed. Yeah, I agree with that. Not only accessibility sharing, but also compensation. If you're wanting to access my data at land management and it costs me this much to create it, I'd like some compensation for continually maintaining that data because it has to be maintained. And the software has to be licensed next year again. So there is that cost in providing that to the public. Although you have the argument, well, it was public money that hired those people to enter that data. You know, there is a cost after that data is entered to maintain that database. And you know, at least some staff members find it. I thought we're not supposed to use the word territorial anymore or something. So just a comment on the bill because that's what I wanted to do in the bill. I was comment line by line. And of course, develop new business ventures, academic enterprise, and generate revenue for the greater good of Guam. Of course, that's all in there. Recently, we had the contractor for the Commission on Decolonization come to land management and wanted, wanted copies of certain documents to develop precision statements on this type of a political status on down the line. And I said, well, what do you want? He goes, I want everything copies. Man, that thing's going to be about a 5-foot stack. Can I give it to you digitally? Yeah. And how much are you going to charge us? Well, I can't charge you because you're kind of like agency to agency. But that's the issue that we have usually. The request is that they want copies of their document or they want to see the history, the land management history of the document. Not so much on this, on it. Line 3 finds that government agencies have generated and are in possession of territorial land data that is used to inform planning, making rights of way, survey markers, etc., etc. So yes, that is true. But sometimes when we use government money to obtain that data, a lot of times, 90% of the time, we probably use an outside vendor to do it. And there has been some question recently of vendor working on a government contract to obtain data and then provided that data to government of Guam, but somehow still maintaining proprietary rights to that data. Now that happened back in July of 2018. I was working at the legislature and there was a very, very user-friendly and very good system. You pull up a map and if you can see where San Vicente School is or something, at least that orientation of knowing, you can find out where your lot is, put that pointer over that lot number, your house, click on that, you get your zoning, your map number, your assessed value for taxes, your tax code, and things of very, very important information. That went down on a dark and dreary day, July 2018. And I made inquiries with OPEC and with Bureau Statistics and Plans, and the word I got back was that website was proprietary. Although previously land management was sending out, their email things, and you have that thing on the bottom that says, your signature, or in the email messages that land management puts out, it says, check your land, and it would have connected you to that website. That was a very friendly and very useful, very informative website. But that went down. It didn't crash or anything like that. I think the vendor just took it offline on that. So, we do have and we are in possession of land data, but sometimes the data is not ours, and to manipulate in certain situations. That's why I think it's important in the first paragraph, findings and intent, which data are we talking about that you want this thing to come from, so that
Thank you,
we
Mr.
can
Bernard.
tell you whether we own it or not. On this second page, we'll just go into section two. And section two, I had a little bit of experience of bill drafting, and I would just ask that when we draft bills like this and we put a point two, that we also put point one, so that we know what the previous section was about. Maybe point two has an effect on point one. I don't know. And again, it just leaves a little bit more extra work to do, and maybe we should do it like that. And then the information that says GIS information and digital map layers shall be made available in a digital format. Normally, GIS information and digital map layers are digital formats already. We do print those digital files into hard copies, but normally that is, I think, the important thing there in that line 11 is the word shall as opposed to be made, and I think the drafter made note of that. Section 13, the same comment on line 15. There is a B. Reading the bill to make comments on it, it would have been nice to know what was A, or it could have been a formatting error. I mean, I've made errors formatting bills and letters where your indent is set, you hit it, and it automatically assigns it like that. So it would be good to see what A is, just in the context of the bill introduction. I don't have any comment on those B, C, and D. Those are just, I guess, definitions, important. But I was just kind of taken aback by 19, where in this bill that we are amending a existing article already concerning GIS, that we are only now defining what GIS means. I mean, I'm sure, and I wanted to see the section A because I'm sure GIS was defined, earlier in the law or in this process of GIS. Okay, GIS digital map layers are public records include but not limited to, et cetera, and like that. Yeah, and I guess that covers just about everything. For land management, just maybe a clarification on survey markers and land and boundary maps. There are basically two types of survey markers. One you have is your private survey markers, the private landowner, and then land management has what we call the GGN network, the Guam Geodetic Network. And these are special survey markers. They're brass, they're about 6 inches in line, and in some cases there's a metal post to it warning people, don't bulldoze that area. So those are the two types of survey markers, and we just want to make sure that we include that. That we have a GIS layer on that, and people doing construction work, earth moving work, are required to get clearance from the land management that their activities, earth moving activities, are not in an area where there is a GTN marker and like that. Very important because those GTN markers were not actually put in by GovGuam itself, but we had help from the government of Australia in 1993 putting those markers down, and those are the basis for the other private surveyors. And then land and boundary maps. If we are going to enact this law, I would suggest that we stay only recorded land and boundary maps. We hesitate sometimes to release maps that are proposed maps or sketches and like that, so the definition of that land and boundary map should be just a solidified. If you're going to do that, then make it a recorded map, one that's approved by land management, recorded. Everybody can see it, not just certain people, if you are going to do the law. Section 4, and we'll go right into the last page here. And this is the interesting one. You've got almost a double negative in there where you say no department and then inconsistent. The way that staff read this section of the paragraph, it's, and a lot of people, when they saw your bill, Senator Castro, I'll just say that, what? We're giving away the data, the free data? You're going to give it away free? So that was kind of like the initial reaction, Senator. And I see you shaking your head, not saying that. But, looking at the language, and, we have the legal language, the notwithstanding unless otherwise provided. To me, it basically says that you can charge fees for that digital format file, GIS layer. You just cannot charge more than what you would have charged had you given it in a duplicate hard copy, and that fee shall not be more, or that fee should have already been set by Chapter 9, Title 5. And I haven't looked up Title 5, but I'm assuming that's the administrative adjudication law. So, unlike that. So if we don't have a fee in the schedule right now for that, and I don't know, we're checking into that. So if we don't have a fee for digital, which I don't think so, because our fee schedule was made, I think in 1970 maybe, when it was scheduled, hasn't been changed to that. Digital and electronic things weren't really happening. That's when I had black hair, by the way, Senator. So that has to be, clarified in there. But I think basically saying that you're not giving it away for free. You can charge for that digital format, and you have to make it available. Shall make it available. You just cannot charge more than what you would be charging if you were to give them a duplicate hard copy. And then, by the way, that fee should have already been set by Title 5, Chapter 9 GCA, like I said, which is that. So, and that would have an effect on Section 6. So if the bill is enacted, passed, and then the governor signs it, I cannot give a GIS layer to the first applicant the next day, because if those fees are not in there, I would have to go to the administrative adjudication act law. But I'm always for bringing revenue to the department, and I mentioned earlier to you, senators, committees, that we are a special fund agency. We only get budgeted what we bring in, and we had a 2 or 3 month lapse on our recording fees when we closed down because of this virus thing, but we might be recovering tracking. And then, of course, Section 5 is severability, which you understand to mean if Section 4 is illegal, then Section 3 is still good. And then Section 6 is just the effective date. Effective date usually means people expect that when it hits that effective date, then you better have what I wanted according to the law. And right now, I don't know that we can provide that, Senator. So it's not really testimony for or against the bill. It's just my observation from having a little bit of experience in land and in the bill drafting and in the law. So I'm also open for like that. And just again, just to kind of like lay out our playing field, when it comes to the technical stuff, that's OPEC side. And we respect that OPEC side. When it comes to the creation and the funding of these databases, it's really a Bureau of Statistics and Plan. And we just submitted a grant application for $450,000 to upgrade our land management system and to pay for our license. And by the way, I believe it cost the government of Guam, entire government of Guam, $100,000 for a GIS license. that services, I believe, about 100 people, 100 employees in Gabwa. So just, relatively speaking on that. And just as a comment on the Senator Will Castro and you mentioning submitted testimony, I do have testimony from Mr. Mario Garcia, and just a little bit of background on Mr. Garcia. Mr. Garcia is a former employee of land management. He was transferred over to HRRA where they needed assistance. He is a heavy user of GIS for his work thing that he's doing at HRRA, number one. And also Mr. Garcia is educated and schooled in GIS, having taken several courses, I believe, at GCIC. So I hope the committee would consider his testimony. Secondly, within land management, we have one computer systems analyst too. His name is Henry De La Cruz. And I would also encourage the committee to seek some input from Mr. De La Cruz. Mr. De La Cruz is Microsoft certified, and he has been with this setting up of the database and GIS from the beginning with land management. So I certainly hope that the committee would seek their info and input on GIS matters and computer matters. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Borja, for your testimony. And we'll certainly take the notes of all the suggestions that you've made line by line. And it'll be in the digest in our committee report. So again, thank you very much for your input. We've also received written testimony, as you had mentioned, from Mr. Frank Lujan Jr., the Chief Technology Officer with the Office of Technology, as well as Matthew Sanchez from BSP, and Mario Garcia. For the record, the committee received testimony from Mario Garcia on this bill yesterday, and unfortunately, Mr. Garcia is unable to join us today, but he has requested that the committee read his written testimony into the record. And at this time, I'd like to call on our committee director, Mr. Christian Valencia, to read the testimony into the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Testimony from Mr. Mario R. Garcia, Buenas Hafaday, Committee Chair on Telecommunications and Technology, and members of the 35th Guam Legislature. I would like to share concerns I have with Bill 156-35 as a conscious community individual who works for our government. The following points are my concerns. Comes from the evaluation conducted to support the GIS/LIS Division, Department of Land Management, for the past several years prior to my transfer to the Hagåtña Restoration and Revitalization Authority. Since the enactment of the GIS/LIS Division, Public Law 21-42, Chapter 3, Section 27, it is my opinion that there are no adopted standards by the Department of Land Management to ensure data integrity or data fidelity, document integrity, data resources, data security, data access, and document retention to deploy a geographic information system. It is also my opinion that the Guam GIS standards can be developed and adopted from evaluating existing standards identified from the following. 1. State data management for geographic information system can be found in the Bureau of Land Management, Department of Interior. 2. The United States Geological Survey. 3. Federal Geographic Data Committee. National Spatial Data Infrastructure Strategic Framework. And 4. Environmental Systems Research Institute. Additionally, the Geospatial Data Act of 2018, or GDA, Public Law 115-254, HR 302, Subtitle F, Section 751 to 759, puts forth the geospatial data standards with special attention to SEC 757A3 that may relate to sensitive geographic data that should not be included for public consumption. With respect to the proposed bill and the above referenced citations, may I share the following. First, if or when millions of dollars of public funds were expended to gather data specific to the use of federal dollars, such projects would be in compliance with the above standards that allow for the publication of such data in a form of a study, report, or digital map, which may include a disclaimer that allows for the credits for the use of the data. In this case, stakeholders will need to contact the author of the published document and request for use of the data with appropriate citations. Second, per the enabling legislation, Public Law 21-42, Chapter 3, Section 27, the Geographic Information System and Land Information System Division within the Department of Land Management appears to address the availability of recorded documents to be made digitally available through the division. The integrity of the GIS-LIS division and its functionality appears to become challenged with the codification of Public Law 30-35, specific to Section 32103D6, G and H, which may imply that a person who certifies with the metadata of a geographic information system database must be a licensed surveyor. This does not appear to align with the above industry citations for geographic information systems. ESRI provides guidelines for metadata that may be associated with its enterprise license agreement. These conflicting laws reduces the government effectiveness and efficiency of understanding which the Division of Department of Land Management is accountable for the development and deployment of a geographic information system that meets internal and external stakeholders' needs, to which Public Law 21-42, Chapter 3, Section 27, and portions of Bill 156-35 proposes to address. Third, has the Department of Land Management established a data dictionary or data schema from the different recorded documents for its geographic information system? Similarly, has the organization worked with the external stakeholders in identifying what information from the documents are required for their use? What are the current available services and capabilities within the Department of Land Management that allows for published GIS layers to be shared with internal or external stakeholders using a geographic information system? While working for the Department of Land Management, I had not identified any published shapefile for internal or external use. However, there are many shapefiles, but appear to be works in progress and are short of having the metadata certified by the citation of Public Law 35-30 or of the ESRI Enterprise License Agreement with appropriate standards. Fourth, prior to my transfer, I had supported a DLM GIS-LIS division staff in consort with the Office of Technology in disabling USB port within a specific division of land management. The support activity was to prevent unauthorized transfer of electronic documents onto external drives without receipt of payment. Additionally, securing these USB ports was also to mitigate the threat of introducing unwanted viruses into a government equipment or to the government of Guam's wide area network. This may lead to work stoppage for one computer, but up to government operations shutdown should the GG1 become affected. The cost of recovery may not equal the access of one unknowingly corrupted external device in either case. Fifth, with the passing of Public Law 34-76, the establishment of the Office of Technology as an agency of Guam, Section 1948, Section 3, within 180 days of enactment, transmitted proposed Technology Master Plan, any and all divisions within the government of Guam to unify necessary purposes and functions. Does this imply that the Office of Technology inherits the functional duties of the GIS-LIS division to which source documents are stored? Per Public Law 34-76, does this imply that the Department of Land Management pay for services to the Office of Technology for the functions of the GIS-LIS division established for the Department of Land Management under its enabling legislation? The last known draft Information Technology Strategic Plan 2010 is no longer valid. From Frank Lujan. Therein, per Public Law 34-76, where is the draft Technology Master Plan so both internal and external stakeholders who use the ESRI software can align their activities to the draft Technology Master Plan and the mobilization of a geographical information system? Lastly, the ethical dilemma of allowing a GIS product and information paid for by one customer to become free to another customer should not fit well with anyone. Although Bill 156-35 speaks of millions of dollars of public funds, it does not speak of what the funds were paid for what reason. Were the funds appropriated through Guam laws? If funds were appropriated from Guam's coffers to any specific agency for GIS projects, Our government laws provide for transparency and accountability. Inclusive, if Guam's geographic information system has met the standards set forth by the above citations, such publishable information becomes available for external stakeholder use. Therein, the important question to ask is, has the government of Guam established a geographic information system in compliance with the above 1 to 4 references prior to the Geospatial Data Act of 2018? If yes, then the concerns brought forth by Bill 156-35 have been addressed. If no, then it is my impression that the government of Guam will need to establish the standards for a geographic information system in compliance with the Geospatial Data Act of 2018 and the ESRI Enterprise License Agreement. In closing, I would like to share an adage: garbage in, garbage out. George Fuchsel. Bill 156-35 has great future vision of what our government capabilities can and should be. Public Law 34-76 appears to address our government's growing need of information technology and information systems, but may not address the intent of Public Law 21-42, Chapter 3, Section 27, and the creation of the GIS-LIS Division for the Department of Land Management during a period of land ownerships and land areas sizes of disputes, or Section 60319, indexing and recording old. The recorder may preserve all documents, books, and records in his possession by the process, when properly certified by the recorder, shall be considered duplicate originals. Moving too fast toward without the rigors of information technology or information system best practices in developing and deploying a geographic information system while maintaining legacy systems in accordance to law may lend to fraud, waste, and abuse of resources. In this case, the Division of Land Management Records Division, Public Library of Duplicate Originals are no longer available for public access and inspection, which Bill 156-35 speaks to the access of land information. Additionally, as an external stakeholder to our government's process in having ESRI ArcMap 10.6 loaded on my home personal computer, I am unable to find any published shapefiles from the Department of Land Management that Bill 156-35 speaks of. However, as an external or internal stakeholder of our government's process, I am able to find published information from the University of Guam. Lastly, as an external or internal stakeholder to our government processes, I am unable to find any online service that provides Guam-specific land information from my home computer as well as my work computer. I share my experience as a community dual stakeholder to our government's operation to provide feedback to our governing body. Respectfully, Mario R. Garcia. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Valencia. And at this time, I'd like to invite other senators if they would like to provide remarks on the bill or ask any questions to Mr. Borja, or if you just have general comments. I just wanted to note for the record that, as I mentioned, Mr. Frank Lujan from the Office of Technology will be providing written testimony, but the committee plans on asking Mr. Lujan to make any recommendations to the committee to add any regulatory constraints or guidance that might help us to better protect and manage this sensitive data that's being discussed in this measure. And so with that, I will hand it over to the sponsor of the measure, and then we'll go in order. Senator Castro, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Borja, thank you so much for your line-by-line review. As you can see, it's all your fault. I'm just kidding, Mr. Director. And I do appreciate the constructive criticism and useful information to improve the bill. This is actually some material that I'm very familiar with in terms of GIS. You're absolutely correct. The record should reflect that GIS layers remain not just with DLM. As a matter of fact, I think Mr. Garcia's letter almost hit the nail on the head. GIS layers actually reside in anywhere between 8 to 12 GovGuam agencies. You probably mentioned a couple of them: BSP, DPW. At BSP, you would have some coastal management land layers like marine protected areas, some rivers, some estuaries, things like that. At DPW, as you know, there are street maps. There are even maps for fire hydrants that would be very useful to the end user. At the Department of Revenue and Taxation, as you know, Mr. Borja, this has been a perennial problem between the two agencies in terms of the real-time exchanges of information, like in the transfer of title when selling a property. You also mentioned GPA and GWA, and I think it's important as we improve the bill, especially when it comes to the protocols on releasing sensitive information in the interest of preserving homeland security, that we definitely establish those protocols. I do appreciate both Mr. Garcia and Mr. Joe Borja's request to break down, maybe list an inventory of how much was spent and what the products were. That was a general statement applied to every, I guess if you took the last 10 years and look at how much money was invested in the people in terms of intellectual property, what are they? I certainly can delineate just off the top of my head about 3 agencies in 3 years, maybe half a million. So I'll work that into the construction of the improved bill. I want to stress that this bill probably, and one of my colleagues wrote back and said, so what are we going to do from here? There's 2 things I'd like to suggest. And when I get the feedback, there's 2 things. We can attempt to pull it all together because Mr. Garcia is absolutely correct. By statute, the Central Technology Authority for the Government of Guam, as you all know, is the Office of Technology. But we all know that that differs starkly than real life. I can tell you from firsthand experience that all those layers don't reside in any one agency at any given time. I think the closest we ever got to it was the Guam Land mobile app that pulled 8 different layers together on one. And this is what prompted the bill. What prompted the bill was exactly that, Mr. Borja, that if you would go to ask somebody, or Mr. Garcia referenced in his letter, and I really appreciate the degree to which he articulated this. If you would go to DLM, for example, and ask for a copy of this shapefile or land map, this GIS layer, that not everybody in the agency would either know where to get it or how to handle it in terms of its transmission to the member of the public and or another government agency. And so my approach is, if we can cure the concerns about sensitive information like personal identifying information or information that might harm homeland security, if we can cure that, my approach to this is just make it available and let the private sector do what GovGuam has not historically done very well. And so I thank you all for your input. I appreciate my colleagues sidebarring me here on the side messages and giving me some good constructive criticism. I know that there's a lot more work to be done here. And I can say that in jest, but also in truth, that my legislative intent of my bills differ starkly from when I started in January of this term. I think it's not as long as the body of the bill. So I thank you for that, and we're making improvements along the way. Other than that, Mr. Borja, I'd love to come and see you and your staff, and I thank you for serving and for your critical feedback. I will review the Office of Technology's testimony. I'm aware of the sentiment that is coming from it. I understand that the Guam Association of Realtors, oh, by the way, as another point of consideration for my colleagues, when we developed this Guam Land mobile app, putting it together from 8 different agencies, when it was discontinued from being online on your mobile device, there were at least anywhere from 3,500 to 5,000 individuals. Now they may not have gone to DLM, but I'll tell you where they went. They went to BSP. They went to the original at least person who was facilitating this. Some of you senators, I think Senator Lee also probably took some calls or messages that they're wondering, where is this Guam Land mobile app? And the hang up we had, Senator Sonagsin, this is an old discussion we've had when we were serving last term. The hang up we had was that these people who were developing the app, we're talking about the private sector, could not get legal access to this, what one may think is proprietary information. And that's the point of the bill. If it's proprietary to the people because we paid for it, whether it's GovGuam money or whether it's federal subsidies or in the form of grants. There is a fair use policy, and Mr. Mario was very sharp to point that out. And so I'll make sure that we make it abundantly clear or redundantly clear in the local statute that information should also be made accessible to the people of Guam. And you're right, they do go to the university for some of this information as well. And it is still accessible because they do a really good job of publishing it at a location that anybody who has interest in this kind of data can access it. We can't say the same for all of the Government of Guam agencies. And it's not just because they don't have the internal capacity. They certainly don't have the infrastructure, Mr. Borja, as you know. And so again, I thank my colleagues. This is a great first step forward. I appreciate you, Senator Lee, for hearing the bill. And giving me the opportunity to hear input from the general public. And see my colleague, Senator Sonagsin, ready to jump in on and get involved. So I'll defer to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Mr. Borja, I just wanted to acknowledge that I did see you raise your hand. Did you want to make a comment before we move on?
Yes, and it'll be my last comment. Just with Senator Will Castro's comments. And number one, on that DRTDOM situation with the real property tax and not sharing the information, that problem's been solved. And it wasn't that the computer and the software wasn't talking to each other. It was basically the people weren't really working. But that problem has been solved in general. But these contracts for these vendors are almost yearly, and they do hold some control over the process and the data. But that problem generally is solved, and that has to do basically with the ID for the condo unit, because real property tax deal in the land, and when you trade a condo, it's that land is actually stacked up. Secondly, that the website that the senator was talking about, I believe that was the website that was launched about maybe 8-10 years ago. It might be a good idea to have some sort of oversight hearing to see what happened from the time that launch ceremony that they had over a land management, I don't know how many years ago, and then fast forward to today to see if we could learn anything from that. And then thirdly, I just want to remind the senators that the language in the bill says no department, agency, or instrumentality of all branches of the government. So just my comment that it doesn't seem that the big GIS players are here. This bill also affects other branches of the government and not necessarily just the executive branch. So you got to look at that too, the other branches of government as well as the military parts of our government. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Borja. I want to acknowledge Vice Speaker Nelson, if you have any comments or questions on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does Department of Department of Revenue and Taxation, their real property division, they already have something installed similar to a GIS system. Is that correct? That would be perhaps to the sponsor of the bill or Mr. Borja. Nice to see you on the other side of the table, unfortunately.
All right, thank you. Oh, it's fortunate. We all work for the same people. but I would defer that question to revenue and tax. I believe revenue and tax is working with two different types of software. I think one of them is the Amentum, but then they have what they call the tax map. So the technical part of all these things, I would defer to the experts on it. But I'm sure they have something, to receive the data that we give.
Okay. Okay, so the testimony submitted by Mr. Garcia, the list of concerns that he has is Department of Land Management ready to implement some rules and regulations on how to process documents if they were to move forward with the GIS system?
Well, and I'm not sure. And again, we're talking GIS, LIS. GIS, Geographic Information System, mostly geographic information. LIS, Land Information System, mostly documents. So there's that different priority. What people want, I think, is to be able to sit at home on a Sunday night, log on the computer, see their records of land management, and then they see something, say, I need a copy of that, and be able to download that and pay for it without having to go to land management. I think that's what most people want. General public, realtors, and like that, they want to do that. Access to our system, to our data, is not really controlled by land management because of the security issue. I think, at least for land management, we're all for making copies available, and hopefully the government, the public paying for it. It's a source of revenue for us, especially being a special fund agency and not a general fund agency. But the security concern there is giving access to people into into the system, into our database. I think that's the biggest concern here. And we're not the one that authorizes people to go into the system. It's actually OPEC. It's our data, but we don't decide who goes into our system. Now, members of the public come to land management and they request to have access to the system, to the database. They can do that, but they can only do it on one of the machines, one of the terminals in land management. So you actually have to be in land management to do that. But for somebody sitting down Saturday night, Sunday night that wants to check, or for that matter, off island. For that matter, we get a lot of off island requests, of course, because that's the easiest and fastest way, you know. But some people may want to research their property off island. They want to see how far their CT request is going. And access to the system to get that information, that's not controlled by land management. Like I said, we do get requests. It's almost 100%, I believe, approval from land management and the records division to grant that person access, but they can only access it in-house.
Thank you, Mr. Borjas. Vice Speaker, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to have an understanding on when they build out the system, when they upload the documents or upload the information onto, so apparently it has to be a completely separate server. Will they still be archiving the documents? Because sometimes there's concerns that in the past that certain land acquisitions were questionable. So how do we track that? Are we ensuring that these documents are also going to be available for the public?
Well, the documents are available to the public. Yeah, the information is available
to the public.
When you record a document before, in my day, you had to give like 3 copies. One is the original copy. That original hard copy goes into the vault. That's the original copy. 1 copy goes to the public library, the library that Mr. Mario Garcia says no longer existed. That's actually like a regular library. You walk in and you touch the books. Of course, now they have ebooks. So that's 1 copy of that. The other copy is supposed to go and does go to revenue and tax, so that any changes in your tax bill is reflected based on that transaction that was recorded and land management. And then, of course, if it's the assessee changed, no longer is the son paying it, for whatever, the assessed person of that tax changes. So that's usually what happens. Now, along the way there, when it first comes in, at the end of the day, those documents are secured and brought over the next day to the vault area where they're scanned and they're turned into digital files. And at that point, the 2 files kind of diverge. The hard copy file goes into the library, the hard copy library. The scan file is then to be made available to the public. In other words, it's to be posted into the database. It does undergo a vetting process to make sure there's no the lot number is correct, the municipality is correct, there's no social security number on that before it's scanned and made available to that. But even in that process, land management will scan the document, they will post the document. That document is not available to the public until the private vendor pulls the trigger, and then that digital file of that document goes into the server. Now that was the way that it was explained to me by our computer systems analyst. And that's why when we were talking, I'm not an expert in computers information technology, but I believe I have some knowledge on the process, the linear process of that document. It does diverge at one point. Hard copy gets into the library and nobody sees it unless they, court action, they want to see the original, something like that. And then that digital file, goes in a different direction, goes to the server. And by the way, land management servers are maintained down at OPEC. And we at some point in time we've got to give some money to OTEC to maintain our servers. Their people maintain the servers, and number two, our servers are pretty much on the full end. And so, what are we doing about that? We've put out in our that grant application that we put out. We're asking for about $200,000 worth of servers in there for land management based on our documents. By the way, just for general information, we're getting really close to 1 million documents recorded at land management. And out of those 1 million documents, we have about 65% of them are scanned. So that's one item probably that Mr. Garcia is mentioning. As Mr. De La Cruz should the committee speak his information in that, okay, we can make it available to the public, but if we're going to charge the public a certain amount of money, we got to give them a good product. And right now we can only give them 65% of our product because
Right.
that's all that's scanned.
Just one comment. Thank you, Mr. Borja. Just one comment. There's a disconnect, I think, with the Office of Technology's function and role in this, and then Department of Land Management's role in this, and how do we balance this $3 million for the resources that you will need to install this GIS LIS system. And so I think that if we can connect those two dots, that we would have a better understanding of how this process is going to work, and if $3 million is really all that is needed. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator, there are 3 dots. The other dot is 3 dots. The other dot is Bureau of Statistics and Plans.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Next up, our Legislative Secretary, Senator Shelton. Do you have any comments or questions?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I think my questions were pretty much answered about the cost of this being stood up and of the sensitive information and the protections that we would need it. I believe, Madam Chair, you answered that you would be working along with the Office of Technology to find that specific information that we would need. And so I thank you, Mr. Borja, for your testimony. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot in today's hearing, so I'll continue to listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Senator Joe San Agustin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just listening, Joe, good testimony, but, I like to see this bill. Well, maybe Senator, we just need to just work on the bill a little bit. We just get it fixed. But Joe, when there's comment by my colleagues saying that there may be a communication going on downtown, you guys all sit down in a cabinet. So work it out in the cabinet, do your kitchen work, and then tell us how it's getting fixed. And then we work it out when we get in the budget. And I think that's the best way to go instead of, I don't like to reveal what goes on in the kitchen or what's going on in the cabinet. You guys just figure that out. And then, Joe, you let us know. Because when we sit down and we talk about the budget, then we work it from there. Because I will reach out to Frank Lohan and ask how come he's not communicating with you, because that's what's revealed already. And ask everybody.
No, please, Senator, please, there is no miscommunication of any of the sort between OTEC and land management. If there's a misunderstanding, it's probably with me. The last time I was with director, there was no central OTEC IT thing. And now that I'm back in the government, there is a OTEC central thing. So I kind of had to check what the authoritative relationship is with OTEC in terms of, when you're going to buy a computer now, you can't buy it unless OTEC signs off on it, and they'll tell you what you need and they're telling like that. But the relationship between land management and OTEC is it's at its best. I can't say too much for that. We call them up at 10 o'clock. Of course, they don't respond at 10:05, but they do respond. So there's no problem in the relationship. And it goes also with your statistics and plans. We don't have any problem with it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Joe. And like I said, Madam Chair, I'd like to see this bill. We just work on it, Senator Castro, and we fix it. We'll just and then resubmit it. Then we get it going. We got to get technology across the board in all layers, and that's what's missing in the government of Guam across the board. And if this is the bill we need to get it across to get that message out strongly, I think most of my colleagues were saying that at least when we click on our phone or on our computer, we can actually find the data, and we don't even have to see the person that's in control of it. We can see the data, and it speaks for itself. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Sinagin. Senator Jose Pito Terlahi, you are recognized. Any comments or questions on the bill?
I just want to thank Joe, man. You know, I've been meeting with Joe almost every week regarding land issues. So, Joe, thank you very much. I know you're very, you know, you have all the things that you need. You have the experience, and I know you're doing well up there. And I want to thank you. And hopefully, we're going to meet again by next week. I can guarantee that, Joe, because you know there's a lot of people that's coming to my office regarding, and the only thing that I tell them is that you know Joe Burra is here with us, and he's going to take care of your problem. Thank you, Joe.
I think I know the case you're talking about already, Senator.
Huh?
I think I know the case you're talking about already.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pito. And I just want to acknowledge for the record, Senator Therese Terlahi has joined us. Senator Therese, do you have any questions or comments on the bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just Joe, wanted to thank you and Mr. Garcia for the testimony. And yes, I know we've been talking about this, but do you see that this, do you see, I know you've been working on the priority of this land information system, and that, you know, land management used to have control of it until OTEC was created. Land management employees were the ones who inputted the data pretty much, and you know, maintain all of that. And so things have changed, and over just the last couple of years, like you said, since 2018, and then the whole system went away with a vendor, I guess. And but I know that you've been working on it, and we asked the OTEC when they were with us at a hearing recently. But can you give us an update on yeah, what your plans were for just the land information system, or like how far have you got with that?
Well, you know, Senator, the end of the line, the end product, at least for land management, has always been and has to be the availability of up-to-date information and accurate information concerning land, so that people don't mistakenly buy a piece of property that's not what they think it is, not that size or not the owner, and like that. So one of the most important things that the land management provides is that public notice. Notice to the world that Joe Cruz owns that land. And if anybody wants to do anything with it or around it, that's the person to contact. And land management is the one that is in charge of maintaining those records. Now we have what we call a torrent system, which is the government certifies, issues a certificate of title that that's your land. Normally, a torrent system is actually administered by the court, not by an administrative agency. A torrent system is normally, in the way that it was set up in Australia, it's actually administered by the court. And you know, when the court says, you own that land, yeah, you own that land. And the chances of hanky-panky with the documents in the court in the judicial system is far less prevalent than, you know, than in a land agency or a regular government agency. So that's the end product that we're trying to look at. But before we get to the end product, you have to have the tools. Number one, you have to have people trained in doing it. You have to have a data control clerk to be able to put that thing in, and an employee to look at the document, analyze it, is that the correct information, and like that. But then that employee has to be provided with the tools, which is the hardware, the computers. Right now, land management computers, half of them are outdated, and half of them do not meet the security protocol of OPEC. So that's where we're at in the hardware.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
now after the hardware, you got to get the software, what you're going to run in that. And I have to learn, and I think incoming users have to learn what the structure is of that hardware. You know, you can buy it if you want at a big price, or you can get it a yearly subscription and get updated on that. And of course, that's with a private vendor. So you know, kind of lose control on that if a private vendor is running your software to run the data that you put in like that, you know. So what we're trying to do first part is to get, we have the people in land management that are trained to do this. And I wish I could give them a raise because what they're doing on this is far and above, I think, what they're doing it with the equipment that they have. But having said that, you know, we have the equipment on it, we have the people in the train. What we need now is the equipment. And of course, the hardware, we have outdated hardware. And then the software, uh, like the mobile apps that Senator Castro was talking about, you know, we found out that that portion of it was some of the software that we're working on, EGIS, you know, is proprietary information. And that's the one that the people like. So that's where we are in that linear thing. How do we address the hardware thing? We submitted a grant. Of course, the grant is competitive. I believe there were 9 submittals. You know, we pray that we'll get it, but we're not sure. It's a reasonable grant, I think, like that. If we get that, OPEC is working. They are the ones that are working on the contractor with the vendors and like that. Land management doesn't have a contract with the vendor that runs the the system. So if you were to look at our budget and see, you know, the contractual part, you won't find any amount dedicated to that. Although I believe we should be helping pay for that. There's nothing in our budget. So because of that, you know, we are at the mercy of whoever holds that contract. And I wouldn't say mercy because I believe we have a very good relationship with OPEC and with GSP. But that's the situation that land management is at with its LIS and GIS system. You know, the staff in there are saying, you know, Mr. Borja, people come in here and they want to copy their document. They have their thumb drive or they have their camera. Can I just have them take a picture of the document and charge them $1.50? Now, you know, that's not like in the rules or like that, you know, and like that. We make, just to let you know, we make 55,000 a year from copies of documents, from people walking in or calling up and saying, I want a copy of my deed, you know. Okay, so your deed is 3 pages long. Here's a, you know, pay the lady $1.50. Land management, it is a special fund agency. We make approximately 55,000 on the high end on copies. So that, you know, so that's how much we make on that. So we certainly don't want to lose that by giving it up. $55,000 is one position at land management. That pays for one employee at land management generally. So that's kind of, you know, how we're looking at it, relatively speaking.
Thanks, Mr. Borja. What I was trying to get at, what I'm trying to get at is, you know, yes, of course. So you applied for the grant, but I thought that OTEC made it clear that they were trying to pursue the former program, or I thought he made it sound like it was just a maintenance contract, that we did not keep up with the maintenance contract, and that's why they, you know, took it away. And that we were going to try to pursue whether we could, you know, all that data that had been inputted, you could get access, or we could restore the maintenance contract and get that part of the system, the LIS, or, you know, the, like how you described the user-friendly part up immediately. And when we talked about this with you and then with OTEC, it did not seem like all of, you know, that was the goal for at least interim, immediate, and placing this on layers with the GIS system is ideal, but I don't think it's really necessarily a priority for users of land management at this point. Maybe for, you know, government in general, like with BSP and planning, but I guess it was just that I was hoping you were closer to that. Yeah.
Senator, you are right on that. Because when we put the grant together, we had to get OPEC's input because it was an e-grant, electronic grant. And yes, in that grant program, OPEC did ask how much we spent how much land management spent on maintenance of the land web, and we told them how much it was, which was $90,000. But it is still true also that we don't have a contract. But checking back, when I came into land management, I believe it was the public auditor that asked how much money was spent on contracts with the outside vendors from land management. Our answer was no, but our answer was also $90,000 because there was payment made to a vendor for the maintenance. So when we were putting the grant together, OPEC inquired as to what did land management pay in previous years for the maintenance of the software. And we told OPEC $90,000, and OPEC said, can we include that in the grant? So if you look at the grant and you go down the grant, there is one grant expense item there that is for, I believe, $90,000 for maintenance of that. So yes, on that, but the contract or negotiating that wouldn't be with land management, and it would be with OPEC doing that.
OTEC will do the
grant money.
negotiating for the contract on behalf of land management. Yeah,
Yes,
that's
yes.
the difference right
Yeah.
now. Yeah. How soon do you think that would be implemented?
Well, I believe the grant decision on the grant, looking at the regular cycle of the grant, we'll probably get that information in August, whether we get it or not. Now, I believe OPEC is also pursuing those funds on a separate track. I don't know because I believe in the budget that pre-COVID-19 budget submittal, I believe OPEC included a certain amount of money in their budget request for the maintenance of that database or that website. Now with post COVID or not yet post, but after this declaration is over, I'm not sure what their budget request is going to look like on it. But I do know that they looked on that track. But then when they found out, as they should have, of course, that we were applying for a grant through DOI, a technical assistance program, they said you better make sure that you include some money in there for the maintenance of the thing. So one of them may work. I hope both work, and we'll see what happens on that.
All right. Thank you.
And thank you for your support, Senator, on that. We submitted your letter of support for that grant.
Thank you,
You're
Mr. Borja. Thank you very much, Senator Therese. Next, I have Senator Mary Camacho Torres. Do you have any comments on the bill or questions for Mr. Borja?
Yeah, I want to thank you, Joe Borja, for very excellent testimony today, and also to Mr. Garcia for giving insight into what many of us had no idea was the complexities of this issue. But I just want to ask you a very simple question, because there are many of the points you've touched on already, but just a practical question. You commented a lot about the legislative intent and findings, and one of the areas there was that there's an increasing demand by the community for such data, and secondly that there is a finding that this sort of policy, accessibility policy, is needed to authorize wider use of such data, to a variety of people, including educational. But in your opinion, is there anything that prohibits somebody with the needs to know, a developer or such, from accessing this data right now from any one of the players? You mentioned 4 or 5 big boys is what you called them, the people that have GIS right now. Is there right now something that a problem with them, those people that actually need to know the information legitimately, from getting it, or is it just?
And I started out my comments earlier with the growing need or the increasing demand. I think is for the LIS section, to look at my documents, to look at my deed, to look at my mortgage, or possibly figure out how much that property was sold next door. But this kind of request is probably going to be coming in from technical people, because the file that you get, it's not like okay, so you want a copy of the letter? Can you give it to me in digital form? I give it to you in a .doc or .wp file or a .pdf file. You usually want a file that you can work with, and like that. And normally the general public doesn't do that. Uh, I don't think there's anything that would be that would call back the request on it. I do know that, for example, our survey division is now requiring that maps for review be submitted in digital form. Save your paper, give it to us digital. You don't have to come down here. We'll do it, do a review and send it back to you. And the problem in that process may be for the surveyor to do research of maps produced on it, but those maps should be recorded maps, and the documents that he's probably looking for are in the LIS section, not necessarily in the GIS section. So this may be a specialized need,
And that's what I thought.
Certainly, certainly there are people that require this type of information. Yes.
But I think what really hit me was the comment by Mr. Garcia, and it's what we were sensitized to, 15 years ago when the was a big issue, and water systems and electricals, and so those are the things that I think now the world of pandemic we've sort of put on the back burner. But I appreciate that people have to understand that the needs to know, and the people that legitimately would make use of this information has to be proprietary, or you should have proprietary control over those sorts of things, because it's, as you pointed out in your discussion, we're really talking about what the common folk really would not have an interest in accessing. So it should be limited, I think. But I don't want to waste more time. I understand under a timeline, but I just want to bring up that point.
Thank you, Senator Torres. I appreciate that. We do have a few constituents and folks waiting to testify for our next bill just in our waiting room. So I just want to be mindful of that. And Senator Luis Munoz, do you have any comments or questions on the bill?
Just want to make a comment, no questions, but I do want to thank Mr. Borja for his very thorough testimony. And again, I did, like Senator Shelton, learn a lot today just from this hearing, and appreciate your testimony along with the written testimony from Mr. Garcia. And I think the author of the bill stated in his opening that it was simple, and it was made simple for that matter, that we can go in and make our comments and suggestions and strengthen the bill. I do believe that we are in an age where things are shifting more towards digital, and I think people, even now during this COVID, that people are now learning how to do their banking online as opposed to actually going and lining up at a bank. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to shift that idea of accessing information, whether it be maps or whatever else they need. But I really do feel like this is a great opportunity for us to expand the access to the people. And as far as the fees are concerned, there are people who do pay a little bit more for convenience, whether we want to keep it the same as just acquiring paper copies, or maybe even lessening it so that we can get the people more towards the digital world than the actual hard copy. But again, however way we can assist you, Mr. Borja, in making your job a lot easier, please let us know if there's a maybe you want to offer a substitute bill or something where we can, work it together with Mr. Castro or Senator Castro. So thank you again, Mr. Borja.
Thank you, Senator Muña. And at this time, I'll just recognize the Vice Speaker for one final comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do believe that this measure is a great leap forward, especially when we are looking at our government of Guam technological advances. I do care what happens in the kitchen, because when we're dealing with technology, it's not just a matter of plugging in something and playing it. You have to purchase independent servers, you have to purchase switches, you have to purchase licenses, and then you also have to ensure that you have engineers or software programmers that understand how this information is processed and sent out. And so this can be a recurring cost. So for us to anticipate the recurring costs and the additional resources that we'll need to maintain this system, I think that we need to understand the plan. That's all I have to say, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Vice Speaker. And with that, I think everybody's had an opportunity to make comments on the bill. Again, I really want to thank Mr. Borja for being here with us today, and also for all those who've provided written testimony to the committee. At this time, I again want to thank you all and just acknowledge that the Committee on Federal and Foreign Relations, Telecommunications, Technology, and Labor hereby considers Bill number 156-35 COR as publicly heard. At this time, colleagues, we'll take a short 5-minute recess while we get the other stakeholders out from the waiting room and test all of their audio and prepare them for the second part of today's hearing. So Taka, if we could just go to a quick recess. Suzosma. Undang Nasizus Maasi, the Committee on Federal and Foreign Affairs, Technology, Telecommunications, and Labor is back from our break. We will now move on to the second item on our agenda, which is Bill number 287-35 COR, an act to amend subsection 10102A, add a new item Q to subsection 102, amend subsection 10108, all of Article 1, Chapter 10, Division 1, Title 22, Guam Code Annotated, and to amend subsection 81.10 of Title 9, Guam Code Annotated, and to amend subsection 7120 of Article 1, Chapter 7, Division 1, Title 22, Guam Code Annotated, all relative to expanding the Guam Registered Apprenticeship Program, or GRAP, to include pre-apprenticeships, authorizing tax credits for participants of GRAP, and providing work credit for GRAP apprentices in order to strengthen construction workforce development. This bill was introduced by Senator Joe S. San Agustin, Senator Jose Pito Terlahi, and Senator Clint Rigel. At this time, I'd like to invite Senator Joe S. San Agustin to deliver opening remarks as the prime sponsor of Bill 287. Senator San Agustin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Bill 287-35. The Guam Registered Apprenticeship Program, or GRAP, was created in 2006 by the Public Law 28-142, recognizing the need for an adequate number of skilled industrial, construction, and technical workers to meet present and future needs arising from military contracts, the private sector, and government maintenance of the island's infrastructure. With H-2B shortages and worker requirements for Guam build-up related construction projects, Guam housing market continues to be out of reach for many families. We all know that the cost of building homes in Guam has increased in part due to a labor shortage. For example, in 2017, the median price for a residential home was about $225,000. In the first 10 months of 2019, the median price is at $270,000. That's a 20% increase in median price over a 2-year period. We can only imagine what the cost of building a home is today. With the opportunity for skilled trainers to train numerous individuals with interest in construction trade exists, and the need to expand the opportunities for individuals often comes with the inability to cover costs for training. Offering a pre-apprentice training program will provide the industry with an opportunity to seek and retain the cream of the crop in trade workers, affording both employers, and apprentices the opportunities to affirm their desire for employment. The tax credit offered to skilled trainers will provide the industry with a balance to continue the training of apprentices, ultimately gaining new skilled laborers. The credit is incumbent to the trainer, securing 10 pre-apprentices throughout the term of the training. We will strengthen the local construction workforce development by expanding available training options under the GRAP to more individuals who desire to enter the local construction workforce as pre-apprentices. There are a variety of pre-apprentice programs serving a different population, while some programs serve specific populations, such as veterans and with many youth programs. We look to expand the GRAP business that provide skilled trainers to eligible training providers list, or ETPL, or to a nonprofit organization working with a registered ETPL on Guam, who provide training in carpentry, painting, masonry, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, metalwork, heavy equipment, surveying, or renewable energy technology to workers who are unemployed and unskilled. Unemployed and unskilled veterans, service disabled veterans, residential substance abuse treatment program participants, are eligible participants of the work credit program. By including eligible participants of the work credit program, we will provide an opportunity for adult offenders to pursue rehabilitation while developing valuable skill critical to curb recidivism, while re-engaging with their families and communities. These are but a few of the goals we intend to reach with Bill 287-35. We can assist many individuals obtain skills for life that will encourage a generous return in the future. I'd like to thank Senator Jose Pito Talay, Senator Clint Rigel, who signed it on as co-sponsor, and I hope that my colleagues will find this beneficial to our community and that they support the measure. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to offer my opinion on the bill. I look forward to hearing the testimonies from our community stakeholders.
Mrs. Masi, Senator San Augustine, and I just want to begin by thanking everyone for joining us this afternoon for this virtual public hearing. We do have a number of people that are signed up to testify, and I want to be able to get to all of you and also have the senators who are on with us give them an opportunity to ask questions or comment on the bill. So if at this time, if we could limit your testimony to just 5 minutes, I think that would be appreciated by everyone. Mr. Gerard Tovis, the Deputy Director of the Department of Labor, is accompanied by Ms. Phyllis Tapasnia, the GRAP Administrator, and we'll have them go first, followed by Dr. Okada. Buenas, Mr. Tovis. I apologize, Mr. Tovis, you're gonna have to unmute before you begin.
Buenas and half a day.
Half a day, thank you.
Buenas and half a day, Madam Chair, Madam Vice, and Honorable Senators. My name is Gerard Tovis, the Deputy Director of the Guam Department of Labor. Director De La Sola sends his regards, and with me is Ms. Phyllis Tapasnia, the representative of the Guam State Apprenticeship Agency. Apprenticeship is a key driver for developing Guam's workforce. Guam's apprenticeship model is one of the most successful across the nation. The Guam Department of Labor is eager to continue and expanding supporting apprenticeships for the people of Guam, and we'd like to thank Senators Joe San Augustine, Pito Terlahi, and Clint Rigel for their efforts on this legislative findings and endeavor and intent for Bill 287-35. We also want to thank you, Chairperson Senator Regine Biscoe, for your engagement in Guam's apprenticeship programs and holding this public hearing to strengthen our workforce, especially in apprenticeship. In total, we at the Department of Labor support the expanding of GRAP tax credits to employers of GE workers and training individuals in pre-apprenticeship programs. However, we recommend Bill 287-35 apply to all industries and not just construction when it comes to points of interest for GRAP, pre-apprenticeship eligible training providers, and nonprofit organizations. Other recommendations from the department are as follows. In reference to page 2, line 14, it states, the tax credit offered to skilled trainers will provide the industry and so forth and so on. And so since GRAP is offered to the company of the that employs these journey workers, we recommend state the tax credit offered to the employers of the skilled trainers will provide the industry and so on. Again, on page 2, lines 17 and 18, it states to strengthen, words before that, but to strengthen local construction workforce development, we recommend it includes all industries, especially new and emerging industries like aquaculture and agriculture. Lastly, on page 2, lines 19 and 20, it states GRAP to more Guamanians who desire to enter the local construction workforce as pre-apprentices. We recommend it state GRAP to individuals qualified to work on U.S. soil and who desire to enter the workforce as pre-apprentices. In reference to page 3, lines 10 through 13, it states carpentry, painting, masonry, and a lot of other construction occupations. We recommend it state all apprenticeable occupations to participants who are underskilled and unemployed veterans, unemployed and unskilled, temporarily assistance for needy families, TANF, and of course the RSAT program and so on. Our veterans are the main reason for the conception and existence of the American Job Center, Madam Speaker. The AJC, they should have preference. Because of the sacrifices they have made, it's only right to identify them first on this proposed bill. Lastly, on page 3, Lines 23 through 25, it states an apprentice may include a pre-apprentice, which is defined as any person training an apprentice in preparation to enter an apprenticeship. We recommend that pre-apprenticeship have its own definition on this section, Madam Chair. In reference to page 4, lines 1 through 4, it states skilled trainers means first line supervisor of construction trades, which may include so forth and so on. We recommend it states skilled trainers and or journey worker. A journeyman or journey worker encompasses all of these things that were related as a skilled trainer and even more. Also on page 4, Madam Chair, lines 11 through 19 to include page 5, lines 23 through 27, and also page 6, lines 1 through 8. We recommend all of these have its own subsection and possibly titled tax credit for pre-apprenticeship program participants. And to have the lines follow as according. To add on page 4, lines 14 through 18, it states business privilege tax liability equal to 100% of the eligible cost paid and incurred by the business for skilled trainers. We recommend 2 things on this, Madam Chair. Instead of 100% of eligible costs, we recommend 50%, and it's already established within our existing GRAP law. And number 2, just end as stated on line 15, stating 50% of the eligible costs paid or incurred by the business, and therefore, so no need to identify the specific costs, as also as mentioned in the model of our existing GRAP law. In reference to page 5, lines 23 through 27, and page 6, lines 1 through 8, we recommend that it states skilled trainers must provide training in all apprenticeable occupations to participants who are underskilled and unemployed veterans, unemployed and unskilled, temporary assistance, TANF, and all the other programs involved, and of course with the 50% tax credit. What has not been addressed, Madam Chair, is the timelines and outcomes within pre-apprenticeship program. The Guam Department of Labor recommends that pre-apprenticeship program be about 12 weeks, which has been standard for like boot camps and other pre-apprenticeship programs that we've been assisting with, which is enough time for a participant to develop soft skills, on-the-job learning, OJL, if you will, to eventually decide what apprenticeable occupation they so desire. And as far as outcomes are concerned, Madam Chair, outcomes are measured by gainful employment, which is the ultimate goal for the AJC, with the confidence that the pre-apprentice can eventually work towards apprenticeship. In closing, pre-apprenticeship programs are designed to develop soft skills, attitude, accountability, appreciation, attendance, all the good stuff, which helps individuals become a better prepared for gainful employment. Since early 2019, the Guam Department of Labor initiated pre-apprenticeship programs to create and develop a skilled applicant pool for employers to fill entry-level positions and to basically help the underemployed, which is our mission. Danklu Nasizuus Moasi for the opportunity, Madam Chair, to offer our testimony.
Sujusmasi, Mr. Chovis, and I also want to thank Miss Phyllis, who's been kind of the backbone keeping our GRAP program really moving. We certainly appreciate all of her work and the work of the team at the Guam Department of Labor. So thank you for being here with us this afternoon. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Mary Okada, who is next on our list. And following Dr. Okada, we'll hear from Mr. Martinez with Guam Contractors. Dr. Okada?
Day, Madam Chair, and members of the Committee on Federal and Foreign Affairs, Telecommunications, Technology, and Labor. For the record, my name is Mary Okada, President, and I serve as a President and CEO of the Guam Community College. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on behalf of the Guam Community College regarding Bill 287-35. As you know, the Guam Community College has been a strong proponent of pre-apprenticeship programs, which prepare people for apprenticeship within our community partner companies. We firmly believe that the pre-apprenticeships that have already given scores of our residents the opportunity to prepare for successful apprenticeships, opportunities they may otherwise have been unable to qualify or complete. We strongly support the intent of Bill 287-35 to strengthen local construction workforce development by expanding available training opportunities under the Guam Registered Apprenticeship Program to more Guamanians who desire to enter the local construction workforce as pre-apprentices. In fact, during the past academic year, GCC conducted 2 construction pre-apprenticeship boot camps, 2 transportation ship repair boot camps, which taught construction skills, and we are now preparing for a 3rd construction boot camp that we hope to be held in the fall. Through our partnership with the Guam Department of Labor, we have been able to develop a strong program that includes skilled trades and career soft skills. We have heard time and again from our private sector partners that soft skills training is as critical to employee success as the skilled trades. The Guam Community College has worked closely with the Guam Department of Labor in ensuring that MDF funds are optimized based on the workforce needs of our community. We thank the Guam legislature and the author of this bill, Senator San Agustin, for your support of our efforts. After reviewing the proposed legislation, we proffer the following considerations. First, GCC does not have, and I'm missing a word in my testimony, have a structured post-secondary pre-apprenticeship training program. This program is specific to courses that we offer in the public secondary schools. The secondary programs is partially funded through federal grants. GCC employs 49 faculty that provide career and technical education courses in 6 public high schools, depending on the resources and facilities that are available to use. Regarding the use of MDF funding toward direct students enrolled in the pre-apprenticeship programs, we ask that you consider the use of other funding sources, such as federal financial aid or Pell, Department of Labor program or grant funds, or other financial resources before mandating the use of MDF monies. This will ensure that apprenticeship programs are adequately funded and sustained in support of the growing need for skilled construction workers. Additionally, under the current budget law, Public Law 35-36, the college is responsible for submitting quarterly reports for the expenditures of the MDF funding, including the number of participants in each GCC program, the amounts expended from appropriations in the Act by object classification, a description of each program, the academic courses offered, and the requirements for participation in each program. GCC has successfully complied with these reports as required. And finally, under Section 7120B2C, the existing language is adequate to cover any expenditures required for apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship facilities or equipment needs for public facilities. We recommend leaving this provision as is to ensure that the fixed assets of the government of Guam remain under the government of Guam. Therefore, we recommend that the language to include, quote, any nonprofit organization authorized to provide training, unquote, be excluded from this bill. This also ensures the alignment of the pre-apprenticeship program at the Guam Community College. As always, the Guam Community College stands ready to serve our island's workforce needs. In this unparalleled time of uncertainty, GCC proudly stands on our proven capacity to pivot as our island and her people require in order to prepare our workforce to meet the needs of the economy. I thank you for allowing me to testify today and respectfully submit my testimony for the record. Sijus Maasi.
Sudusmasi, Dr. Okada, and I also want to thank you so much and the team at GCC for all of the work that you've done in this area and pre-apprenticeship and all of the great boot camps that you've been having over the last few months. We greatly appreciate that in helping really to strengthen and improve our workforce development here on Guam. So thank you for participating today and thank you for all of your work. Again, next up on our list, we have Mr. James Martinez, the president of the Guam Contractors Association, and then we'll hear from Mr. Carlos Camacho, the president of Ironwood Guam Development. Mr. Martinez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony for Bill 287-35 with regards to me, is creating a pre-apprenticeship program for Guam. I agree with Mr. Tovis from the Guam Department of Labor, as well as Dr. Okada from GCC, on all the points that they were mentioning. And I don't, in order not to repeat what they said, I do have some issues with the, or not issues, but concerns with the bill that probably need to be clarified. First and foremost is the definition of a skilled trainer. What a skilled trainer is, according to the bill, is that it's a first-line supervisor of construction trades, which may include construction foreman, construction superintendent, construction supervisor, field supervisor, and the like. A skilled trainer in the registered apprenticeship program is actually a journeyman level type person who shadows an apprentice at the job site. There are instructors, or you want to call them skilled trainers, or instructors that teach on the classroom level, both at GCC, the GCA Trades Academy, and some private contractors who do in-house training. But what bill doesn't spell out is what qualifications do these so-called skilled trainers have that will qualify them to teach construction trades other than their titles. That's pretty much what it is. There needs to be some qualifications for these instructors to be able to teach the courses for the applicable trades that is in the pre-apprenticeship program and even in the apprenticeship program. So that's something that needs to be clarified. And I agree with Dr. Okada that there needs to be some structure in a pre-apprenticeship program, which I don't think actually exists. And I think that's the first step, is to create the program for a pre-apprenticeship program that would allow these pre-apprentices to then get into a registered apprenticeship program. There is no guarantee or no a pathway that would, where a pre-apprentice starts and where they complete. I know the recommendation was 12 weeks, I think is what Mr. Tovis had mentioned from the Guam Department of Labor, and that seems reasonable. But what courses or what topics would you include in that pre-apprenticeship program? So it needs to be a structure in that program in order for this program to work and then turn into a registered apprenticeship program after they complete that course. I also agree that I think this should not only be open to the construction trades, but also open to all the participants already in the GRAP program. So whatever it says here with regard to construction, I think it should be open to all other industries. While I appreciate, that we're trying to increase our workforce development programs in construction, I think there are other industries that also need to help. Going into the tax credit portion of the bill, there already exists a program within the GRAP where the journeyman level who are shadowing the apprentices, as well as the instructors, are also included in the program for a 50% tax rebate on the business privilege tax. I don't see any reason to give preference of 100% to those companies that provide instructors to the program. I think that the current GRAP program already gives that allowance of 50% to be, used as a tax credit for all the eligible costs to have an apprentice, or in this case, a pre-apprentice. But the tax credit is not extended to a pre-apprentice according to this bill, which I probably would agree with. Then next is the skilled traders must provide training in carpentry, masonry, electrical, and all the other trades to unskilled, unemployed, unskilled veterans, service table veterans, and residential substance and others. And if this is for unskilled and unemployed, if they're working for a company, I guess the question I'm asking, are these pre-apprentices going to be paid positions within a company or within a program? Because then they'll be considered employed and not unemployed. And so I don't know if this is going to apply to the skills trainers getting that tax credit, because now these folks that are entered into the program are becoming employed. So maybe I'm a little confused with the language of that bill. But if they are not employed, in other words, they're pre-apprentices and looking to be trained to get into construction or whatever field, then yes, I believe that the company should be credited somehow with providing that expertise to whatever programs that provides training for these pre-apprentices who are not employed. So that's something that needs to be clarified. I'm not sure if I misunderstood the language, but that's what I got out of it. And there's a provision that credit will only apply if the instructors have a minimum of 10 pre-apprentice applicants described in section J of this bill, which is again referring to unemployed, unskilled workers. So again, if they're already working for a company or for a program, then to me they're employed, and therefore that won't qualify the tax credits. I like the idea of the work credit for DOC and those that are incarcerated to get credit for doing this type of work and getting trained for that. So when they get out, they would probably be looking for employment after they get released from prison. So I like that provision. The other thing, the Manpower Development Fund. I think we should just leave the Manpower Development Fund alone, and I agree with Dr. Okada that there are other programs that will provide funding for pre-apprentices. That includes some WIOA funding from Department of Labor that we can start with for pre-apprenticeship. And then when they graduate and complete the program and get into an apprenticeship program, then the MDF fund would be able to fund that program. So I like to keep the Manpower Development Fund just for the apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship program, rather than to be used in the pre-apprenticeship program to pay for instruction and whatever else. And I think we should leave that alone. I also noticed that the provision there for the 70% of the Manpower Development Fund that goes into apprenticeship, and it says or pre-apprenticeship, but yet you can't use the pre-apprentices to get a tax rebate if to get a tax rebate from the GRAP. So that's a little bit confusing. In one section they're considered apprentices, but in another section they're not. So I think that the GRAP should just stay away from not paying or not getting a 50% tax rebate on pre-apprenticeship, and keep that just towards the registered apprenticeship program. So that kind of waters down the apprenticeship program, and we want to make sure and keep the GRAP program and everything for registered apprenticeship and not for any other training programs. Other than that,
I apologize. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm just going to ask if you could please wrap up.
Yeah. Other than that, I think for the most part, I will support this, but we need to clarify some of the issues and the questions that I have with regards to this bill. So thank you very much, Madam Speaker, or Madam Chair, for the opportunity to submit our proposal or
Thank you
testimony.
very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Martinez, for all of your feedback. And next we'll have Mr. Carlos Camacho with Ironwood, followed by Mr. William Berry with Situ and Hill Group. Mr. Camacho, the floor is yours.
Hi, Senators, Madam Chair. My name is Carlos Camacho, but for the record, I'm speaking today on behalf of Micronesia Community Development Corporation, which is a nonprofit organization.
I apologize. I'll correct that in our log.
And I appreciate it. Anyways, I'm thankful that Department of Labor made their statement supporting it with modification amendments. I'm very thankful for President Okada making her statements and recommendation. I have no issues with those, and let me just explain the reason. And now I got 5 minutes here. Explain the reason. All those partners I dealt with. I dealt with GCC. I dealt with Department of Labor. Micronesia Community Development is a WIOA. Let me just check my title: Work Experience Agreement, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act recipient, where we train the unemployed, unskilled individuals. To clarify with James, these are the people that go to Higher Guam that is either unemployed, unskilled, that put their name in the registration at Higher Guam, and they go to the counselor program, and then they transfer them to us guys in the OJT program, and then we pick them up for this type of, in my case, on my MCDC, we do the single family affordable housing project. I worked out an arrangement with President Okada almost a year and a half ago, 2 years. And yes, we were one of them. We did the first boot camp cohorts, and that was a 6 weeks or 8 weeks program, which was never, and this is where I deal, if you don't mind, I'm gonna suggest some of the growing pains I went through of all those minimal restrictions. 12 weeks, 8 weeks is never enough time. When I put these guys in a boot camp, they were very helpful. We increased our capacity, and I know Senator Talina Nelson was there when I took her out to the site. When we finally got the unemployed, unskilled, and we even got students, the one that James talked about with DOE. We have students that worked with us every weekend so they can earn their half credit to graduate learning the skills with a partnership with GCC. So all that worked for a year and a half, but I had a failure. I never had stable, skilled workers to train my volunteers to build these homes. I never had, because every time I got them, the industry, because of the lack of workers, they were picked up immediately with the military workforce. They were picked up in other projects because there was a demand for labor. So I keep losing them. So this is the reason why, and President Carter was there. We met many times with labor on trying to finding a solution how we can make this work. This is why I met with several senators. I said, can we figure out a more stable pre-apprenticeship program? And I apologize, Department of Labor and everybody. I agree of amending it to make it more broader, but it was focused on the construction trade industry, because we were defined when we did that MOU with GCC as a living lab. Unfortunately, the teachers at GCC that was out had to be the students, like the boot camp, to come out, and only whenever they come out to do a lab work. I need to make sure there's 3 outcomes when I do this. One of the outcomes I was looking at was, 1, we provide affordable housing to the low-income families. In today's high cost, as you guys said, high cost construction, we were able to lower the cost $40,000 if I was able to get a mix of these type of resources. 2, if we train these guys pre-apprentice, and this is the one I've been working with Mary Okada and Phyllis Tapasha and everybody, if we get these guys through some type of pre-apprentice program, we would graduate them, or not, the word's not graduate, because even they correct me, labor correct me, can you graduate? They'll get some type of minimal certificate, so that when a company that is a for-profit apprentice employer will finally pick these guys up and pick them up through their apprentice discipline. Let it be masonry, let it be carpentry, let it be electrical, let it be plumbing. So all those tools were available. I went through 2 years of hardship. My family, we couldn't get things done because the demand for labor, I have no control. They go directly
and they go directly to higher paying jobs. That's another factor. They go to high paying, and I don't blame them. They have a life and family to feed. But this is why we push this program to do this. Now, to get to a few answers, 12 weeks on the boot camp, we did that. Yes, we did GCC. And director from the labor, I apologize. 12 weeks. Maybe if we can put the 12 weeks, or can you use the word up to 6 months? Why I say 6 months is because my agreement with labor under the We All agreement as a approved federal construction labor provider, we are able to hire these guys up to 6 months with federal dollars, subject to funding, of course, but hire these guys for 6 months. And in that 6 months, this is the plans we were making with GCC. I was working with Dean Williams and the direction of Dr. Cotta. What courses can we do so that we can have these guys go to classes at GCC? And as Mario Cotta mentioned, the president, you got the basic introductory construction courses. And what courses, and we at the Living Lab, we are actually documenting the hours and time they've learned on all general aspects, because we're only doing single housing. We're not doing commercial buildings, single family houses to build for affordable housing. So this is why I partner up with an ETPL partner, which is a labor approved, which is called Pacific Human Resources. Right now, they provide me with the qualified OJT workers, and they quantify the hours and they quantify the time they work there. What's missing is how do we transform these guys after 6 months? And I'm including some curriculum courses, which I'll be working with Mario Cotta. And, you know, to get to an apprentice, you're going to need, like, let's say one discipline, and I may be off the record, I mean, off time here. Let's say Mason takes 4,000 hours. And like James Martinez explained, you got the shadow guy, you got the HR guys, you got the apprentice, and everybody gets the 50% tax credit. All 3 layers, right? All 3 layers get the 50% tax credit. And he is also correct. Our pre-apprentice applicants who were unemployed first, who went to Higher Guam, and finally, hopefully gets employed through this 6 months bridge through our partnership with labor or through DISIT, because I do take care of DISIT applicants right now. Yes, they'll be temporarily employed through that federal dollars going through this Living Lab program that we provide. And they will document the hours. So when they finally get some courses in between, hopefully they will choose a apprentice discipline by time. 12 weeks is too short, but 6 months is good enough. And I can't speak on behalf of the contractors who are apprentice contractors. I hope Bill Berry can talk about that. But if we get out 6 months of these guys working in living labs, in the hot, sweat, and tears in the sun, we know either if we got 40 will stay. If we got 40 and only 20 stayed, because the other 20 did not want the construction industry. I mean, that type of trade. So then by the time he graduates into either Bill Berry's company or another company, then these guys will then choose their apprenticeship discipline and the 50% tax credit. Now, for James to clarify the tax credit, that tax credit is offered to an employer. The nonprofits, we don't benefit on the tax credit. It's offered to the employer. Let's say Corporation ABC, who's an apprentice, would say, okay, Carlos, if that's you or other nonprofit, do you need a certified plumber because you're at the plumbing stage of all your projects? And yes, we do. And the reason we use the word trades, the word first line supervisor, I got this from Department of Labor, just to let you guys know. James, I mean, just to let you know, Department of Labor, because originally skill trainer was the first terminology that the senator and the 2 other sponsors just defined it. So Department of Labor asked, which was the Wage and Hour Division, Mr. Greg Massey and those guys, goes, hey, we need to further define that. That's the reason the first line supervisor was defined. And when you ask why,
if you could just wrap up, I think we're on time. Thank you.
The reason why there was all those subcategories of all the foreman job superintendent on the same U.S. Department of Labor site that I got this description, it describes their scope of experience already. So that's the reason we use that language, because it already has a scope of experience, which is actually across the board construction labor with plumbing, electrical, reading the blueprint, all that stuff is over there. At the end of the day, I hope you guys just consider adjusting the 12 weeks to up to 6 months, because we have a 6 months program up to 1,040 hours if we do OJT. At the end of the day, why I support the 100% tax credit? You guys said it very clearly. On a for-profit employer for the GRAP, you guys get 50% tax credit and multiple layers. The apprentice employees, when their salaries get 50%, the shadowing journeyman gets 50%, the HR underwriting them gets 50%. On the pre-apprentice side, none of the applicants to get tax credit. They don't get it. Only the lines, the skilled service guy get this tax credit. And the reason you want that to be 100% because that's all you're not getting the other layers. So when you got someone skilled getting paid that, company AB will provide that to anybody to do it. So at the end of the day, I know it's so quick and nothing. Only one thing I just want to add, what everybody's adding on the definition is I talked to public health and we got the TANF. If we can add one more category there called the able-bodied adults without dependents. And the reason that's important is under President Trump's new ruling, just effective April of 2020, any able-bodied adults without dependents, if they don't go into any workforce training program, in 3 months, within 3 months, they receive their SNAP benefits, they will lose their SNAP benefits. If they go into a workforce training, let it be now broadly as we described, then they will maintain their SNAP benefits. At least we don't put them in what we're seeing today where people are getting hungry today. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you.
So
Thank you very
I
much,
support
Mr.
it.
Camacho,
I
and
support all the
know-
changes and recommendation other than those little things that I hope you can reconsider, 12 weeks to up to 6 months and the 100% only for that one layer because there's no multiple layer like the GRAP. That's all for the tax credit.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho.
Thank
And
you.
I know that my colleagues will likely have questions for you, so you'll be able to kind of expand as we go into the question and answer portion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Barry, you're recognized, and then we will, let me just see my order, Mr. Jeffy. So, Mr. Barry, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and Senators. I'm, for the record, I'm the General Manager and Vice President of Tatuan Hill Group, and I'm also the Chairman of the Guam Contractors Association Trades Academy Board of Trustees. So we're heavily involved in training and trying to encourage people to get into training. I'm not going to get into specifics per se, but the one thing that, well, number one, I'm very much in favor of the expansion of the GRAP program and the ongoing continuance of it. We're in a for-profit business as Tatuan Hill Group, and when you're in a for-profit, everybody talks about the number of skilled workers and so on and so forth that we need here in Guam, but nobody talks very much about supervision of those skilled workers. And so we're really shorthanded on both ends. So one of the things I'm very much in favor is you're trying to reward a company that's working out there for profit to borrow his supervisors or his first frontline skilled people for training. And that's really a major step for a company to loan out their supervisors to an operation that is not necessarily making a profit for that company. One of the things we like about the GRAP program is also the fact that we have, it encourages the contractors and the employers to participate in the training program that we're trying to do and trying to encourage people from, here in Guam to get into the business. All of this is to me a positive thing, and unfortunately in our industry we're very busy and we're getting busier. It's a good thing, but it's also straining our resources, and so to keep adding more people to the pool of workers, we need this pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship program. But I like the pre-apprenticeship part of it, primarily because it, like what Carlos is doing with his program. He's screening the people. A lot of young people come into the business and they find out, wow, this is hard work and hot work, and maybe they don't want to do it, and they quit and they go back and do something else. This 12-week or 6-month program would definitely what I call weed out for both sides, the individual and the company. You'd find out how interested you are in construction. Those of us that are in construction enjoy it. We like building things. Typically, over the years, it's been a profitable business for the employees. In other words, they get paid pretty well, but they work very hard for that money. So it's a different kind of occupation. I don't have much more to add except that 100% is a good thing. And anything that we can do to embellish and expand the GRAP program definitely helps the Trades Academy efforts to put more people into the industry. It's a good industry and it's a safe industry, and I think we just don't talk enough about the local workforce. The local workforce has kept us going, and admittedly, the H2 program has helped us and is adding people. But the local workforce is very important to the industry. And thank you very much. That's all I have to add.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berry. Thank you for participating today. Next up, Mr. Jeffrey, and I apologize, I don't want to butcher your last name, so if you could just repeat it for me, help me out.
Thank you. My last name is Vocolo. Jeffrey
Vocolo. Okay, great. The floor is yours.
Madam, Senators, thank you very much for allowing me to testify today. I represent my company, Micronesia Renewable Energy, and also the solar energy industry. I support the bill 28735 as it's written. I agree with Mr. Berry that I think the 100% is very well needed. A little bit about my past in New Jersey, and growing up, I think education is the key to anyone's success, to society ills, right? Poverty, economic inequality. So extremely important. So I had a lot of great opportunities in my life, which were the CBs, which I got a lot of my training out of. And when I ended my career with the CBs, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers in New Jersey. So with that being said, I think the key to the success of this bill is, of course, the funding component of it. So when I was in New Jersey, I was key working, as a contractor, initially a worker and then a contractor with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and setting up a solar energy program in their apprenticeship program. And also outside the IBEW with MCA, which is the Middlesex Solar Energy Industry Association, with an apprenticeship program in solar energy there. What I've done here in the past 9 years, because there really is no solar energy apprenticeship program here in Guam. So we've taken all of our workers, trained them to the best of our ability, not just with myself, but with our key staff that we have on board. And we've also brought in outside companies to train some NAPSET courses here, which NAPSET is the number one program for solar energy, really, in the United States and Canada and most of the world. So we brought companies in to train our, have classes and train our personnel. So with this 100% component against the business privilege tax, I think it's extremely important where that's a funding component now that we could use, hopefully, through a nonprofit or whatever, to help train our employees and train pre-apprentices coming into the industry and apprentices in the solar energy industry. What's key about our industry, it's a leading technology, and really it's a brand new industry. Plumbing's been around for the last 120 years. Electrical's been around since the 1910s. So solar energy really has become mainstream now in the 90s and of course in the 2000s. Brand new industry, very little training, zero training here in Guam. So I think this is a great bill. We're wholeheartedly in support of it, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I again want to thank all of our participants today for providing testimony on this measure. At this time, I would like to invite our senators to provide remarks on the bill or ask any questions of the panel before us. But before we do that, I just wanted to ask the first question. And I guess a couple of you have already answered, but if you haven't answered this question and you are in support of this bill, can you just let us know if you'd be in support of expanding this measure to cover other industries beyond construction, as well as nonprofit organizations, as has been suggested during this hearing? So I believe that was agreed to by Mr. Toves. Dr. Okada, are you in support of expanding?
So the expansion you're asking is on the GRAP side? Or is it
Yes,
also
so
on the MDF? Yeah, because the recommendation I had on the Manpower Development Fund is to exhaust all the existing funding sources at first, before any other, before Manpower Development, so that we can continue to support the apprentices.
Right. No. So for this bill, they're trying to provide pre-apprentice support to construction only, and so there was a suggestion that we provide it for all other industries. So I wanted to know if you're in support of that. Okay. Mr. Martinez, I believe you said you were in support of that, as well as Mr. Camacho. Mr. Berry, are you in support of expanding beyond the construction industry?
Sure, that would be a good thing.
Okay. Mr. Vacola?
I'm definitely in support of that. I think it should be expanded to other industries.
Okay, great. And then at this time, I'll just turn it over to the author of the bill, Senator Joe Augustine, and then we'll go around for our first round of questions with our senators. So Senator Joe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the comments made by the Department of Labor and everybody's comments I take to heart, and that expanding it, changing the definition to not just only construction, but everybody else. Because all the technology has come into play, solar's in business now, and that there may be other fields that we need to consider. And I agree with Dr. Cotta. Before we get to manpower, maybe we got to find another source of funding and then use manpower as the last resort. If not, just not touch it yet until we use up every other means possible, and then we can move from there. And thank you, Madam Chair. And then we'll just wait for everybody's comments so we can make the appropriate amendments and then bring it before the floor and let's get going. Thank you.
Vice Speaker Nelson, you are recognized, and then followed by Senator Shelton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would this bill in any shape or form directly impact competition with larger construction companies that are currently on island?
And Vice Speaker, who are you directing the question to?
Well, perhaps Senator Augustine.
Do you have any questions for the panel members?
Maybe Mr. Camacho or Mr. Martinez?
Okay.
I believe, Madam Vice, that if there's any competition with anybody, competition is always good. And I'll leave the rest to Mr. Martinez and Mr. Camacho, if anything.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to ask you, how do you define competition? And I guess I'm understanding the question. How is it competitive?
Last term, we were trying to do a bill similar to this, and we got a lot of, we had a lot of pushback from developers, but there wasn't really a concrete reason why there was pushback against this, a measure similar to this. And so, I'm just wondering, I appreciate the content in the bill, and I'd like to see this move forward, because especially right now we are hurting in this type of industry. We're lacking workers, but I'm just trying to understand what was the purpose of this pushback. If does this directly impede on developers, larger developers, and their resources, or contractors? That's the question. I see the progress. I see the process of building up skilled laborers, and I think that's what Guam needs to move forward, especially during this H2, this lack of H2 workers that we have, that we're unable to acquire here on our island, outside the fence.
I can't, this is Bill Berry. I can't see any competition, anything negative here. It's all in support from the contracting industry.
The only thing I can see in terms of competition is, and right now what's currently happening, is a lot of workers that are working outside the fence or doing outside the fence work tend to gravitate to the larger contractors who are working on military projects. They feel more secure, and of course those are longer term type projects because they've got, some contractors have 2 or 3 ongoing projects at the same time, and so there's always going to be that opportunity to work. So there is a competition in that sense, where the larger contractors working inside the fence are actually getting more workers from contractors working outside of the fence, and mostly contractors that are working on housing development projects right now, or just single family homes. And that's kind of an up and down situation, but I think that's the only type of competition that I've seen. I don't know how this bill would kind of address that in terms of companies competing for workforce here. Competition is always good. That's how you raise your wage rates, because it's basically who's got the larger carrot that would gravitate more workers to go towards you. So that's the only thing I think I see in terms of competition in this industry.
If I can add on to that too, as a developer, now the other hat I wear, James is correct. The competition is based on the minimal lack of, very minimal trade skill workforce we have in Guam. So you got all the military projects happening where they're awarding every year. You got a lot of contractors going over there paying a higher delta, higher price. And that's what I mean when I said I kept losing my project foremen, my skill workers on my site, because we pay the prevailing wage outside the fence, because I'm doing affordable housing. So we pay what's published by Department of Labor on the labor rate. Unfortunately, we cannot pay the military rate that these guys are going after. So that's the competitor side based on a lot of federal dollars. Well, even the feds recognize that there's going to be a shortage of labor. So Congress passed a bill to say that the military on the fence side, inside the fence, can bring up to 4,000 H2 workers for their project. And by doing that, but there's still that test, and labor can attest to this if it's correct or I'm wrong, because I'm not a contractor, but they have to advertise locally to find out if there is a local pool before they can bring in H2. So when they advertise locally, they will hire all the other guys outside the fence at a par rate. And then now the guys that can't get into the base, so to not lose them, they have to raise their rate to match almost what they're paying in the base. And that's why you see an impact on cost of goods and housing. And this is why we started the sweat equity program. And I know Senator Nelson was there looking at our unskilled trade, and President Carter was there when we did this. But every time I lose that source of pool, I could never finish the product. But by stabilizing the source through the definition we put in this as a skilled worker, and let me explain why we put that definition as skilled worker. because I'm surprised none of the senators asked, and they will probably ask in the floor. They will say, well, what would this tax credit cost us a year? Right? Now that you gave a definition on that line, the first line supervisor. Well, under the same Department of Labor, under their wage for workers, I went under Guam, and thanks for Greg Massey and Mr. Dorinda Mesa. They provided me the average wage, not military wage. Now, the average wage for these guys are at $47,000 to $50,000 a year. So and the reason why, and just to make James understand, Martinez, why we have a minimum of 10 pre-apprentice applicant, we didn't want to make sure that we're going to give away 50,000 on tax credits and only train one person. We want to make sure that at least there's a minimum of 10 pre-apprentice students that will go through this course, led it through the curriculum of GCC or Trades Academy, and some living lab. So at the end of the day, that 10 guys will be earning through the WIA program, if the funds, or through DISIT funds, thanks to the Department of Labor and all that, they'll be earning a wage, and that wage is a minimum $8.75 an hour at 1,040 hours. That's right, that's 6 months. That 10 people will bring in 91,000 in gross income. That normally they had zero when they were unemployed prior to them being employed in this program. So for every 50,000 of a first line supervisor, it brings in 90,000 of potential revenues of income, and the multiplier effects of the home being built for that family, and all the goods we buy at Benson's and Home Depot and all that, those stuff we buy, and those guys pay BPT and all that kind of stuff indirectly. So to answer the word competition, it may be not for you, since you said developer, this program may not be fair to the for-profit median income development, but the programs we do are for very low to low income families anyways. These are the guys that will be non-competition to that development market because they will never get access to a home anyways. But thanks to our tools and resources to labor, GCC, Trades Academy, and hopefully now the senators that will give the opportunity of this, this will give the opportunity for our projects to be defined as a living lab and take those resources and help cut the cost down of these homes and make it available. So maybe that angle, it will be a competition to the market, but we're tailor-made to the low and very low income anyways market.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. And Madam Chair, you know, Mr. Camacho has mentioned that I've gone to these sites, visited, and really getting to see how this concept was in operation. And, you know, you have families building their own homes, and it was really a good sight to see. We have one in the legislature that his family was a part of the program, and every time I see him, I said, "How's the house going?"
Yeah.
And so, you know, and we do see the multiplier effect that we talk about. You know, this is property taxes once your house is built. This is existing infrastructure. So this money goes back into our water and power agencies. And also we see the need for materials. Forgot to mention Conwood, just to be fair to all the and all the other hardware stores. You know, we will be needing these kind of resources on island, and so we need laborers. I think this is a good program to start to get a kickstart on producing our own laborers. And I even looked up on GCA Trades Academy and GCC courses online as well, and they have a multitude of positions that deal directly with construction and this type of labor force that we desperately need. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Vice Speaker. And Senator Shelton, do you have any questions for the panel? I'm just going to step away for one moment to use the restroom. So Senator Shelton, you're in charge.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I will yield to our other colleagues here. So Senator Mary Torres.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the comments and the digest of this bill. I think the one thing that I'm trying to reconcile is this, the difference between a 50% tax credit and 100% tax credit. And the question that I want to pose is, you know, now we're looking at a pre-apprenticeship program that is going to expand the need for journeymen and the skilled trainers. So is that really reason enough for us to consider that there has to be a greater incentive to the pre-apprenticeship and to those businesses, expanding it to those businesses that are part of the ETPL and working with nonprofits? Is the idea here and the concern here that we don't have enough trainers available, and that the only way that you're going to attract people to make this new added pre-apprenticeship program successful is to have that added incentive? Because otherwise, I heard Mr. Martinez talking about, well, keep it consistent with what we have now with the GRAP. It's a system, it's a program there, keep it consistent across the board. But what I keep going back to is this idea that, and Mr. Camacho, you talked about it, not having enough skilled trainers available to make it work. So what is it that's going to allow this? Because there's, one would argue that 100% is the greatest incentive. But, the program right now is set up for 50% tax credit. But how do we reconcile that? I mean, is it a necessary component to allow the pre-apprenticeship program to kick off and be sustainable? Or what is it that I have to be aware of here?
Well, if I can add, great question, and that was a great question, James Martinez. I got to clarify based on what I thought, why there's two different tax credit. So tax credit, first of all, only applies for a for-profit organization. Mm-hmm. So my MCDC doesn't benefit from the tax credit. For the record, we don't benefit from the tax credit. So the reason we decided, and I asked Senator San Agustin to push to 100%, is how do we attract with this full demand of all these frontline supervisors for all the projects outside the base, onsite the fence, how do we attract them to stabilize on the training side? Before I did that, the year and a half with Dr. Okada and the presidents of, they do have the teachers and adjunct professors at GCC, but they're available only when it's their students. So that's why through the boot camp, the 6 weeks, it was with their adjunct professor that they came out to my site, and only for that limited 6 weeks. I wish I can take all their adjunct professor and make them stay my pre-apprentice at my site Monday to Friday. I can't do that. We need them, as Mary said. They will be at the classroom setting, teaching them the other construction courses, the entry level to the living lab, also the electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and all that in the school. So the reason we're trying to incentivize on the left side is, for example, let me give you one good example. If I use Mr. Jeffrey Vocalo or Bill Barry. If Bill said, okay, Carl, I'm going to provide you, because it's only to a for-profit organization, and it's got to go, we're only offering it to the apprentice guys, because if they know they provided a plumber or this individual that's defined of all trades, that he understands all types of trade for at least for the I'm looking at 2 cohorts a season, 20 per cohort every 6 month cycle. So you get 1 fiscal year. So your exposure is $50,000 of tax credit. And that's the reason, again, I said we use the first line supervisor, and I got that from labor. So we know the senators in the floor will ask, well, how much is this going to be exposed to us? Well, we know it's 50,000 at the max of tax credit. And then the question is, why do you have a 10 minimum students? Well, we know that there's going to be an economic multiplier if you have 10 students or 10 applicants, and they're employed under whichever federal program, as you guys all define, I mean, the other parties define. Yes, they'll be employed for that 6 months, and that's new money coming in with the proper trainer. Now, what happens is that trainer will train, and if it is from Bilberry, or is it from Black Construction, or if it's from Hensel Phelps or somebody that is an apprentice contractor, and he knows that that's his trainer that trained these 20 or 30 applicants, well, guess what? After 6 months, they will move from a pre-apprentice to a apprentice discipline. They'll choose their masonry, carpentry, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, whatever that may be. And then they will apply and benefit with the GRAP program because they still got to shadow them, but at least they went through a 6 months program and we got weeded out the guys that want to stay the course. They still got to shadow them and get, so that guy shadowing them, the journeyman at that company, let's say it's Hensel Phelps, gets 50% tax credit on his income. The HR division that manages those 20 guys that's transferred as apprentice also gets 50% tax credit to manage their books of booking their hours. The apprentice now that's employed under their paycheck gets 50% tax credit. So now there's 3 layers of tax credit on the employer's benefit hiring these apprentices. On the pre-apprentice, again, the pre-apprentice applicants get 0 tax credit. The apprentice gets the tax credit, 1 layer. But it benefits because there's someone skilled under that definition that will train them. So that way the end guys, the apprentice contractors, will know that this guy's got some basic 6 months on the lab training, so that when they finally go into the apprentice, they know that they're not gonna waste their time, and they're, like Bill said, they're busy right now. They're super busy, and at least they can assure that these guys get employed. And here's the beauty about it. That 20 will never solve the 4,000 of H2 coming in. We're still going to get them in, but that 20 will be employable. That 20, that money stays locally. That 20 is now employable. And then I hope they become a next cycle of homeowners after that, because they're at the entry level of the apprentice income, which is the low to moderate income anyways, because they're not going to get the journeyman salary yet until they graduate 4,000 hours or 6,000 hours. So that's the difference, Senator. It's that's the difference, apples to apples. And that's the reason we need to incentivize the 100%, because it's only 1 layer. And that's the reason we have a minimum of 10 pre-apprentice applicants. If you guys want to move that to 20, that's fine. So that way there'll be a more multiplier. We just did the 10 as a safeguard. That way that if it's only 1 that applied, then you will never exercise that 100% tax credit from that first line supervisor, because we never met the test.
Now, the journeyman or the skilled trainer has to be consistent. It has to be the same consistency between the pre-apprentice and the apprentice, or is there a lower tier trainer at the pre-apprentice possibly, or is that? I mean, just forgive my ignorance on that, but.
Well, I went to the Department of Labor because I went to the Department of Labor because originally the bill just said skill trainer. And unfortunately, under Department of Labor trades definition, there was nothing under skilled labor definition. So what we found with Greg Massey and Ms. Dorinda Menel was the word first line supervisor. And that's why, and under that, it defines all the different subcategories. And then it further defines it says right here, activities of what these type of first line supervisors have to have in knowledge. It says direct construction project, to manage a project, review blueprints, monitor construction operation, inspect equipment, tools to be used in the construction, and so on and so forth. Everything that you need on the entry level learning curve for someone that doesn't know nothing about construction. So that's why we have to use that definition, because if we just leave it blank, then we're not really answering their scope of work or the type of training that these skill trainers have or background they have. And I think a company who provides that is not going to give us somebody that probably don't have those skills, because at the end of the 6 months or 12 weeks, whatever you guys decide, I hope it's 6 months, that these guys will have this very broad training program. At the end of the day, when they convert them to an apprentice, then at least they have some type of general understanding of construction trade across the board.
Yeah. So, I mean, at least I can appreciate that incentive is really the key for this to be a successful project. And that's what I'm looking for is, will it work or won't it work? And what is that magic pill to incentivize people to, send the journeymen over to participate?
Another idea, which this law has only a 5-year sunset provision anyways. So at the end of the day, if we don't produce any of this exercise or any successful students to convert to an apprentice, then I will agree to whichever body at that point in the 5th year anniversary date of this maturity to remove it at that point. But I'm not a senator. I'm just asking. That's just, you guys can gauge it. You guys can gauge the success at this point. If really truly that the guys is providing the technical training will yield these potential workforce down the line. Because this stuff, you guys, this same body renewed it because it expired earlier this year, and thanks to Senator Regine Biscoe, she renewed it. But we're just asking for this amendment so that we can utilize this. And I know now that's being selfish, but I'm being straight. We do not benefit on any tax credits here because we're a nonprofit. But the three final outcome is that the companies that provide the first line supervisor will hopefully have access to these pre-apprentice students and become an apprentice. So that's job creation, workforce creation. And that second, the housing that's being built under this program that at least I'm using, maybe it'll create habitat to use it. You know, I share this, and I'll bring this up to Habitat. They can use this also because Habitat is another component of people helping build their homes. But Habitat only does one a year. I do 20 homes every 2 years. It's not much, so you never know. I'll never yield a lot, but with this program, this will help lower that cost. And thirdly, it would generate economic activity through the spending power, as Senator Nelson just described, and all the things, and to include Home Depot, Benson's, Conwood, and all other industries that related, from escrow companies to insurance companies that insure the home, to everybody related to that stuff. So I hope that answers that, Senator.
Thank you, Madam.
Senator Torres, and thank you very much, Mr. Camacho. Colleagues and stakeholders, we have 15 more minutes left on the legislative calendar. So I'm just going to give an opportunity for, I know I have one quick question, and then if the author of the bill has, and the Vice Speaker has an additional question. Mine's pretty quick. I just wanted to ask Dr. Okada and or maybe Mr. Martinez, you both mentioned that you have recommended language that you might be able to provide to the committee to come up with some satisfactory amendments to build in the structure, a little bit more structure to the pre-apprentice program. And so I just wanted to ask if we could reach out to you as we're working through this bill, and if you could provide additional feedback to the committee on this measure. So Dr. Okada?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Thank
and
you.
Mr. Martinez?
No, absolutely. There's a lot of information or resources out there that provide already a structure that's working for other states. The one that I looked at recently was from Oregon, and I thought that was a very successful program. So that's something I share, absolutely.
Great, thank you, Mr. Martinez. Vice Speaker Nelson, and then I'll have the sponsor close.
No questions, Madam Chair. I guess we got lost in the body language.
Okay, got it. Well, I certainly appreciate all my colleagues sticking out with us for the last few hours. And with that, I'll have this good sponsor of this measure close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I look forward to all the input from everyone, and then we can. Then I'll get with you, Madam Chair, and then we'll I guess agree to a great amendment to the bill, and then we move forward. Let's get this program moving. Let's continue the expansion. That because we're going to have a sunset anyway of 5 years, so it's a measuring. There's a measuring tool already in place, and let's just get it going. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator San Agustin, and I certainly want to thank Dr. Okada and Ms. Phyllis from GDOL and all the gentlemen who joined us as well today to provide testimony on this bill. We certainly appreciate all of your feedback. It really will help us to strengthen this measure and to help move forward, again, workforce development for our people. So your input has been so critical. I also want to thank my colleagues, the sponsor of the bill, the Vice Speaker, Senator Shelton, Senator Mary Camacho Torres. Thank you very much for sticking out out with us during this public hearing. Again, Sudus Masi to everyone. The Committee on Federal and Foreign Affairs, Telecommunications, Technology and Labor hereby considers Bill number 287-35 COR as publicly heard. I do want to, as is the prerogative of the committee, possibly consider a markup hearing for this bill. So we'll be apprising you of the date and time for those proceedings, and hope that you can continue to participate as we move forward with certain amendments and marking the bill up. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, undunklo na si Diyos maasi, todas hamzu, podifinaktan midzu pagu, the Committee on Federal and Foreign Affairs, Telecommunications, Technology and Labor hereby concludes this virtual public hearing. Written testimonies may be submitted through email at Senator Biscoe Lee at guamlegislature.org, or may be submitted via Dropbox here at the Guam Congress Building, 163 Chalan Santo Papa here in Hagåtña, until the close of business on Thursday, June 25th, 2020. This virtual oversight hearing is now adjourned. The time is 4:50 p.m. Sudus Masi.